Hi everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Nick Talks. This week's amazing guest is Callum Darragh, who works for the podcast of Lotus Eaters, and we'll get into a little bit of that later. I came across Callum, it was in about 2019, because that's when I got YouTube put on my normal TV. And that's when I started watching quite a bit of YouTube, and that's when I first came across him. And then 2020, I was watching many videos that he's produced. And then in 2021, he interviewed me for the Lotus Eaters for when I stood against Andy Burnham for the Mayor of Greater Manchester. That would have been about May time 2021. And then this year, I've been on the podcast 4 times now, I think. And I'm a little bit of a regular now. I'm going to go down every month. And do a session with the guys at the podcast, the Lotus Eaters. Excellent channel if you don't follow it. I'll have all the links and descriptions, all the links in the descriptions of this video. So first of all, thank you, Callum, for coming on the show, and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I want to make one correction though. I can't remember if it's entirely correct, but I think I actually learned first about you when I was working at the Free Speech Union. I was there for a very small period of time. I was a crap social media manager. Sorry, Toby Young. But I think I might have spoken to you or emailed you or something at that point, around about the time that you had your trouble with the charity. But
probably, yeah.
Yeah, we properly met when you say we interviewed each other at the podcast The Lotus Eaters. So
yeah, I mean, the Free Speech Union were fantastic in my case. They it's no exaggeration to say they saved my life. So thank you for being involved with them several years ago. They've got a big place in my heart, the Free Speech Union. I do all I can to support them. If you like talking, you need to be a member of the Free Speech Union, because like me, you may be sat there thinking, I don't need the Free Speech Union. I'm never going to get into trouble, because that was me 2.5 years ago. And next thing I knew, kicked out of my own charity, all my friends turned against me. I was sacked illegally, as it happened. I had no money, I had no income, but the Free Speech Union got me a solicitor. We fought back, and within 5 weeks, we made the board resign, and I got my job back, all because of them. So make sure you join if you like talking. There's a little plug for the Free Speech Union.
Fair enough. Because for your case, it was incredibly funny, because when I first heard about it, it was like, so he quoted BLM's own website, and that's the reason he was fired? Like, okay, right.
Because only Nazis and racists read almost word for word off someone else's website.
Yeah, we want to destroy the nuclear family. Hey guys, they want to destroy the nuclear family. You're a Nazi. Ridiculous situation. Anyway.
Did they ever tell you about the nicest insult I ever got at that period?
No.
So obviously I was fighting back, and I'm telling people about my experience and 20 years of working on the streets, saving kids from crime, mostly in diverse neighborhoods. So basically, I'm a good guy. And somebody, I think it was on Twitter, posted and commented. She said, Nick, I'll take on board all your good work over 2 decades. I'll take on board that. But you're still a Nazi. Therefore, I think you're just a compassionate Nazi.
There are very few of them.
Well, I think I'm the only one. Yeah. We had our annual conference a couple of months ago, and yet again I was the only one there.
The only compassionate Nazi in the room.
Absolutely. But anyway, it was a crazy time 2.5 years ago. Absolutely crazy time. So thanks for coming on the show. Let's kick off. I think my first question to you is, how did you get involved in politics?
So, like a lot of people, completely by accident. It sort of dragged me in rather than wanting to be involved. So the first thing I remember, like a lot of people, I'd watch political content on YouTube or whatever else about my age, and you knew that a lot of weird stuff was going on. But the thing that made me politicized was that Count Dankula being arrested and then charged scared the hell out of me. For people who aren't familiar,
that's for the Hitler pug dog salute thing.
Yeah, so he taught his pug dog to say, to raise its paw like Heil Hitler. And he made a video. It was a joke. The cops didn't get the joke. The judge didn't get the joke. It was a complete farce. The only reason the police pursued this is they wanted a conviction, presumably, and it blew up in their face politically. Like they became a laughingstock. But the fact that a man could be charged with a crime because he had made a joke on the internet that had caused no harm to anyone in any possible way, other than, well, actually, they couldn't actually find someone who was offended by the video. They had to show it to the Scottish Council of Jews and get them offended by it. Like the police did that on purpose. So then they had a case, but no one was offended, even. No one was hurt, blah, blah, blah. And yet this dude was facing years in jail. That really scared me. It's not the kind of country I wanted to live in. So I got involved in the campaign to write letters to every MP in the country, completely nonpartisan when we started out with the Liberalists. And we tried to get MPs to overturn the law. We got, I think, about 100 and something MPs who agreed at the time that what was happening was ridiculous. But unfortunately, the way our government is structured, that amounted to nothing. So the law still stands as it is. And if you post anything online that is grossly offensive, you're a criminal.
I remember that. I remember that as if that was yesterday. And I remember thinking, what have we come to? Where a joke, you may find it offensive. You might even say it wasn't a very funny joke, or that joke was in bad taste. But that doesn't matter, because for everyone you can find who says that's in bad taste, you'll find 10 more who'll go, that's hilarious. You ever heard of an American filmmaker and comedian called Mel Brooks?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
He's done lots of, he's Jewish. He's done lots of films taking the mickey out of the Nazis. And a lot of his jokes are very similar to Count Dracula. If he was alive today and put that sort of stuff and created it for the first time and put it on YouTube or Twitter, he'd be arrested in this country. And he's a Jewish man taking the mickey out of the Nazis. It's surreal.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things here is that this is all a bit legislative and maybe a bit boring, but that law only applies to online speech. It does not apply to offline speech. There is actually no equal for that law, because if you did, I mean, you'd just spend all day arresting people for being in the pub. So Jimmy Carr, for example, was able to make his joke recently in which he said, what was it? People say the Holocaust was terrible, but there's fewer gypsies. Or that was the premise of the joke, that it's good that all the gypsies are dead. But because he made that on a stage and then it was uploaded to Netflix, he wasn't in trouble. But if he was a YouTube comedian, that would be jail. I mean, at minimum, it would be a serious fine. And that's obviously not right. I mean, it would be hilarious if this was the law in Russia and we could laugh at the foreigners and their backwardness. But this is England, a place that purportedly prides itself on its free speech and blah, blah, blah. But we don't. The reality is 3,000 people every year get arrested for that.
That's an excellent point. We used to laugh at other countries who had silly rules and silly laws, who used to persecute free speech in their countries, and we'd laugh at them, and we always thought we were better than them. And now we're just like them.
For a point of comparison, I mentioned, so every year, the latest statistics I have, about 3,000 every year get arrested. Most of them get a fine. Quite a few get prison time. But in Russia, a country that's much larger, and obviously what they're doing is terrible, but they arrest and put away around 900 people every year. I mean, this is just a point of comparison of we are obsessed with tiny nonsense to the point that we are arresting mass numbers of people for jokes. There was one autistic girl in, I believe it was Manchester, actually. Maybe wrong. No, she was Liverpool. Chelsea Russell. You should look her up if you've not heard of the case. She posted song lyrics on her Instagram because her best friend had died. And the best friend loved this American rapper called Snap Dogg. Snap Dogg is a African-American gentleman who makes rap songs, so you can guess the lyrics. Yeah. So for quoting those lyrics, she was given a fine and a curfew. She was, I believe, 15. I don't know what the curfew was meant to do. She posted them online from her house, but that's the state of the situation. I mean, and the courts just can't be given this power. They apparently can't even determine what's a crime and what's not. So that's the state of Britain for me, and what politicized me into getting into this.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. And going back to that girl in Liverpool, so now it's illegal to quote the lyrics from a black American artist because that's offensive. And offensive to who? And it would be to black people. Well, I'm quoting the lyrics from a black artist. But the N word now has that power. The N word can only be spoken. It's a magical word. It can only be spoken by a black person. No one else is allowed to say it, refer to it, or even write it down. It has special powers now.
I mean, the profanity is actually something I have a bit of an obsession with in a good way, which is that the N word in English, like that whole conversation is very interesting because in that case, actually, no one was offended again because they were just song lyrics. There was a black female police officer who said she might have been, and that was what the case hinged on. Anyway, but with profanity in the West, you get a sense of just how silly this law is when you think about it. There's a guy who wrote a book called the HSFN Principle. And each one of those words stands for a category of profanity. So H is holy words, S is excrement words, F, sex words, and N, racial slurs, right? And what you can do with all languages is actually jot them up, like all of their profanity words, into those categories. And it just about works for every language that we've discovered. And the funny thing is, you can actually see in different cultures, they value certain kinds of profanity more. So in Germany, for example, bodily excretions, the S one, that's valued higher than the F words about sex. Whereas in English, we value the F words more. But then when you start breaking it down and looking at, well, what is profanity? Well, it's just words until the context is provided. And then you go back to a case like that with Chelsea Russell, you realize, oh my God, this whole thing is literally over nothing. I mean, it can be scary to somebody when, oh God, the M word was used online, but when you really get into it, nothing has happened in the slightest. It really is worthless because the context is it's a guy singing about his best friends, but he's a black American rapper, so he doesn't say best friends or good chums. So
yeah, and I like the way you broke down those 4 categories of basically swear words, and those categories come in and out of fashion. So 50, 60, 70 years ago, there's words we use today which has no consequence, which would have been appalling 50, 60, 70 years ago. And some of the racial slurs we're not allowed to say today, we could say quite easily 30, 40 years ago. Words, and especially obscenities, coming out of fashion, and they are quite cultural, and things change over time.
I mean, it's quite funny. We had Zuby in the office, and I mean, that point about what's allowed and what's not allowed is actually quite telling about your culture. Because, of course, you could say in 1940s, the racial slur category, it isn't valued at all. It's completely different. Whereas the holy words might have been more forbidden. And Zuby was mentioning, just as he travels his world and he runs into people, and people in America whine about white supremacy in the modern day. It's like, dude, what white supremacy? What world are you living in? I mean, in the English language, I mean, just on that profanity part, racial slurs are now the worst profanity that we have. And that sort of tells you what's not acceptable. And you would have thought indicators like this would stop people saying we live in some kind of white supremacist patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. But hey, that's leftist for you. So let's not get into that rabbit hole of nonsense.
No. Yeah. And I think the biggest mistake you just made there was trying to find logic in it. There is no logic in any of it, and we need to stop looking. It's a word game they use as a weapon. So when someone's battering you over the head with a club, there's no point trying to figure out, is that oak or is that teak? And is that handcrafted? You're being assaulted, so don't worry about the weapon. And that's what we do sometimes with the left. We try to work out their understanding and their logic, and there isn't any.
But that's the point, getting back to how I got into politics. I mean, that law was passed by Tony Blair. I don't know if this was the intended consequence, but the reality is that law is used by left-wing activists to try and take down normal people who may make a joke you don't like, but also just get used against people who just politically disagree with them. And, well, our culture does value left-wing politics more highly than right-wing politics, I believe. It's when it comes to the criminal justice system. I mean, most recent one has got to be Lawrence Fox's swastika of tolerance. I don't know if you're familiar with what I'm speaking of. So if you take the pride flag, make 4 of them. But the reality is that we have laws on the books that are not just speech laws, but are then used in a political way to shut down activists who are against the left or make fun of left-wing things, like Lawrence did. And so I got into politics we managed to get UKIP to agree at the time, because we joined UKIP campaigning with them, that this law was nonsense and definitely needed to go. And I don't know why the Conservatives haven't. I don't know why there is no noise about this from Conservative MPs. We've tried. We emailed, as I said, we got like more than 100 Conservative MPs who said it needed to go. But it's still there. And this is years on since I got involved.
During the Tory election campaign last month, Liz Truss did say that if she wins, there'll be no law. How did she word it? I can't remember how she worded it, but she basically said there'll be no law that criminalises speech online that isn't criminalised if you said it face to face.
Well, that would be beautiful if she does it.
Yeah, that's what she said. Now, that doesn't mean we'll get what we want, because she might then transfer the law online and say this now applies face to face. So it could even get, I don't think, I'm joking, she won't do that, but technically what she said, she could mean that as well.
You never know, man. I mean, like, stranger things have happened.
Well, exactly. And that's what happens when you write bad laws. If you write a badly worded law, that means somebody else who's slightly cleverer than you can twist it and make it mean what they want it to mean. That's why it's an art, a skill. That's why we need other chambers and other people looking at laws before they become in law, because a badly worded law can do anything you want it to do. And the Miscommunication Act is one of those laws. Right, second question. You intrigued me the first time I came across you online, on Twitter and then on YouTube, and it was your handle, Secretary of ACAD. And the first time I saw that, I thought, I know what a secretary is. What the hell is ACAD? And then I sort of thought about it and thought, there's another guy that I've heard of, that I've seen a little bit about, and he's called Sargon of Akkad. It must have something to do with that. And then I started looking a little bit more than at Carl Benjamin and realised he was Sargon of Akkad, but then he sort of dropped the whole name then. So tell me about Secretary of Akkad, because it made me go, ooh, who is this guy and what's this about?
I work for an Akkadian emperor. What else? No. So I got involved with the Section 127 campaign, UKIP. And of course, that was around about the same time that Carl joined UKIP. It was a push to try and make the British political system respond to the demand there was for this sort of thing. And Carl has his gamer tag that he's had for ages, Sargon of Akkad. He started his YouTube channel with the gamer tag. He thought no one would really watch his stuff, but then obviously he blew up.
What's a gamer tag?
Oh, sure. When you play a video game, sometimes you might have a little like tag before, or a different. You might not use your own name, because that's a bit weird, having your full actual name on video games.
So Carl used to be a gamer.
Yeah,
still is, right?
Never too young. Anyway, so we both joined UKIP. I tried to help him as much as possible with what he was doing, because getting rid of laws like this and trying to make the country more proper was the right thing to do. And eventually, I kept saying to him, because I watched all his content growing up as well, he kept whining, I don't have a secretary. So I said to him, look, have you got one yet? He said, oh, no, I'll get it done. So then we went to the UKIP Youth Conference, and we're all both pissed, and everyone else is pissed. I said to him, have you got a secretary yet, by the way? And he went, oh, bugger it, why don't you do it, huh? So next morning, got the job. And as we were working, and his Sargon of Akkad channel was still him, that was the fun brand. When people would send us messages, or I did correspondence, or wanted people to know who the hell I was, Secretary of Akkad just seemed like an easy way for people to. He works for that guy, right? Like, yeah, that's so. Because I wasn't making videos with my face and doing what I was now. I was just a secretary. And then when we started the Lotus Eaters, Carl just turned to me and said, right, you're on the podcast. And I went, what? And since, that's how it's been.
And how long was that journey?
Oh, God. Trying to think. It must have been at least 4 years or something like that now, if I'm roughly remembering. But yeah, I mean, we started the Lotus Eaters. It's definitely over a year now. It's weird. You don't think about it until someone mentions it, and then you realize how much time has gone.
Oh, I think it's over 2 years. Well over 2 years. Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think the podcast of the Lotus Eaters should be held up as a model of how the new age information and the new way of running a show, especially a podcast, can be done, because it isn't a one-man show. It isn't Carl going, welcome to my show and all this is mine. He's created something that now, I mean, the first time I went to your offices 3-4 months ago, I expected three of you sat there, and I walked in and there was like a dozen people. So it's quite a big production. Your quality production values are amazing. The amount of content you put out is amazing. And it seems to be a platform now to create other presenters and other people to take this fight on and take on the big tech and take on the BBC and to get information out there. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of the presenters end up leaving to start their own version of Podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And I get the impression that seems to be part of the master plan of this. Is any of this correct, or have I just made all that up?
Well, I don't know. It's Cole's business and his baby. I don't have any management or share of the company or anything. So, but I do know when he started out, one of the definite reasons for the change was one of the horrible things about not being a leftist online is that eventually the YouTube terms of service or wherever terms of service will shift ever so slightly until you're out of it. I mean, the free speech union being deplatformed by PayPal just this week, absolute madness. I mean, you think 4 years ago, if you suggested that would have happened, people would have just laughed at you. But there we are. The free speech union are now too radical to even have a bank account. Like, okay. So he was looking at that. It was just him running his own place, a Sargon of Akkad. If they just deleted him, or some rando YouTube content moderator deleted him because they thought, oh, I'm not very professional, let's just get rid of that. So you wanted to professionalize, you wanted to make sure you were within the rules always, so do run it professionally in that regard. And in case, heaven forbid, he got hit by a bus or something, there'd still be a institution rather than just himself, because he got to that point in his life where, he's got kids and whatnot and sees things through that perspective. So definitely there was that in mind when he was setting up the place, which is this is going to be bigger than just one person. So I guess we'll see how it all goes. I mean, it seems to be going all right.
And am I right in thinking that even if YouTube kicked you off tomorrow, you have your own subscription model, maybe your own service or people? You wouldn't lose everybody. All you would lose is the bit of YouTube traffic, but you've got other ways that you're fully in control of.
Yeah, so we have a website at the company, and that has its own redundancies just in case something does go wrong or whatever. So we're pretty insulated, and that's the real positive, frankly. So yeah, if we did get kicked by YouTube, I mean, it'll be a real blow. I mean, YouTube is still one of the main outlets for views, the main outlet for views in terms of just raw numbers. But to actually have the place where the money does come in that pays everyone's salary, that's off YouTube. So if we get suspended for a week or something, it's not a problem. The company doesn't collapse overnight. So there's that insulation, which a lot of places don't have. But I do wonder, you see the Daily Wire does a fantastic way of getting around all that, just in case it happens to them. Stephen Crowder, I think he's got his own website where everything's done that way as well. And as we set up, we noticed, I think it's Konstantin Kissin and everyone else started messaging Carl, be like, hey, I see what you're doing. You got the right idea. YouTube's crazy. So it seems to be the way the right will function in future, which is that you'll have some kind of website where the money is made or some outlet like that. And you'll still have an outlet where you can put stuff up. But YouTube is a side thing rather than just the only thing. People seem to have woken up that YouTube is a mad place.
Yeah, and I think if you are a business person, and I've had many businesses in the past, you have to protect yourself from the unknown, and you can't put all your eggs in one basket. And if your whole business model is based around YouTube, and YouTube then go, no, you're done overnight. You're done overnight. I don't think I've been permanently banned, but I've just been kicked off LinkedIn of all places. LinkedIn. And I've had an email off them now saying you've been suspended, and to get back onto the platform, we want you to send us a copy of your passport, and then we'll decide if we're going to let you back on or not. And I'm like, I don't. Well, I think they intend to kick me off permanently, and I think they want to double confirm my details so I can never join again. That's my only logical conclusion. And the post that triggered all this was something extremely. That was it. There was some race baiter who sells these courses about white supremacy and stuff like that. I think English based. And she was saying about how the Queen is racist, the monarchy is racist. And then she talks about advertising this course she runs. And lots of people were saying, oh, I'm saving up. I mean, it was like £250. And people were commenting, going, I'm saving up for your course. Thank you for raising this. And And I commented that, unfortunately, the UK has no racism. But good luck with your race baiting, and I hope you make lots of money off foolish white people. And that was the post that got me suspended from LinkedIn.
That's ridiculous. Like, you're not even calling her a name. You're just saying good luck with your nonsense.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, they are just completely woke, LinkedIn. So I probably won't send them a passport. Who cares about LinkedIn? But that's the world we live in. If you've got to protect yourself from big tech, you've got to protect yourself from anybody who can shut you down overnight. And you guys, Lotus Eaters, seem to have found the way with that. Diversify where you post your messages, diversify your income. Again, try to play by the rules as much as you can without being censored. That's the way forward. So congratulations on that. I really enjoy the channel.
Well, one of the bits of advice I could possibly give in regards to the rules. So always read the YouTube guidance and make sure you're keeping with whatever nonsense they enforce you these days. But if you go out of it, let's say you do, like we do a live stream on the channel, right? And then we put clips from that live stream on the YouTube channel. So it gives us an opportunity to censor anything that goes against their terms of service. But you don't have to do it in a way that makes you feel bad. Have fun with it. Like sometimes we'll just censor stuff in a way that is so ridiculous. Like you almost laugh at the fact that it's being censored, or stuff like there was a lady who was having a convulsion for reasons I won't be able to mention. But we instead just censored that whole thing with a lady with a thumbs up, just being like, everything's fine. What's the problem? And it works. It's a more fun way to do your job that doesn't make you depressed. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, you're still following and doing what you have to do not to get kicked off, but you're showing everybody else how silly these rules are and how pathetic it is. So you really are still sticking it to the man, even though I mean, let's be honest, we follow rules and laws in this country that we may not agree with, but we follow them anyway because we know we have to. So you don't always have to agree with what you have to do. You just sometimes have to do it and just suck it up and do it.
So there's this funny story that is an old Russian story. It's actually come true since the invasion, but whatever. There's a guy that goes down to Red Square during the Soviet Union, and he holds up a sign with a blank piece of paper. And some guy walks past and says, well, why a blank piece of paper? When you write something on it? And he says, what's the point? Everybody knows the message. And that's the thing with the funny censoring, is that you can send a message without having to do anything that will get you in trouble. And everyone will get it.
What's the age of that joke?
Oh, God, it must be decades old.
So, wow. And now we've got to a stage, that's what people are doing, holding up blank pieces of paper and getting arrested, even in the UK.
Yeah, it happened in Moscow in response to the situation in Ukraine. There was a guy that went to Red Square and did that. He was arrested instantly. So the old story became famous. And then I believe it was a lady in the UK, did the same thing. And the stupid coppers apparently don't believe in England, so they arrested her as well.
Yeah, and lots of people have been questioned by the police for having blank pieces of paper. And one was a solicitor who did it on purpose to see what would happen. And he said, there's nothing on it. And the copper went, but that doesn't mean you might not write something on it later. And it's like, this is Minority Report. And what's the next crime? You have a pen in your pocket.
Comrade, do not think we do not know what you are doing.
Yeah, yes. And you know what? You've hit the nail on the head there. It's because they know exactly what those people were doing. Because you don't need to write anything on the paper. You just need to hold up, and everybody knows what your message really is. And then you get the response by the police of exactly what you thought the response would be, even if you'd wrote it on the paper.
Yeah, it's it really is a meme, but it's a good joke and it's a good lesson, which is if you are operating with this, have fun with your censoring. Don't let it get you down.
Yeah, no, and it was just like we talked about before. Have fun, take the mickey out of the people with the power, so everybody else knows you're doing it under duress, but you still think those people in power are idiots and shouldn't be doing it, and that's all the message we can send sometimes. No, I like that story. I like that story a lot. I didn't know where this holding the paper up with no writing on it came from, and now you've just explained. I thought it was a brand new thing that someone thought up, but it's a decades old meme that has now come true. My final question is, as someone who's obviously heavily involved in politics now, especially the culture war and what's going on, what do you think is our biggest problem in the UK, or what do you think of our biggest problems in the UK?
Those are two different questions. Well, I'll go with the biggest problem first, and then I suppose we'll share what we think the biggest problems are, because that'll be a whole host of depression. So the biggest problem, as I see it, is if you're left-wing in the UK, it's not actually that bad. And you might think it is, because you think, oh, conservative government for 20 years or whatever. But the point is, you actually do have a party that does value having a left-wing leader or left-wing MPs, and they're proud of it, and they do defend it. Whereas, if you are right-wing in the UK, be ready to be depressed every day of your life, because the problem with the Conservative Party, and I don't know if Liz Truss will change this. She's done some interesting things, but I'm still skeptical.
It's early days.
Yeah. The problem we've had is I've seen this meme propping up in Conservative circles as well, the Conservative Party members. Some Conservative MP will say something like, we need to crack down on wokery in the NHS. It's a bad problem. And all the members in the group chat will just say, you've had 12 years. Like, you've had so long. You've had all the power. I mean, since Boris Johnson came in, you've had a ridiculous amount of power, considering the huge majority. Nothing has stopped you from fixing any of these problems, and yet you just don't. I mean, the most hilarious one with the NHS got to be Sajid Javid. No idea about the man, not met him. But he endlessly whined about how he was going to stop woke waste within the NHS. And every single day he would do that, everyone, including me, would just pop the list of new diversity and inclusion heads
Managers,
who are being hired. Yeah. And it's not a small amount of money. I mean, you add up just the list of jobs that will be on there today, it will be like 300 grand. And if you go after they raised our taxes, I mean, again, this is just the hilarity of the situation. They raised our taxes through, national insurance. And the reason for that was to give money to the holy NHS so that they can afford to care for the nation. Immediately, and I mean the next day after this was announced, the NHS jobs listings were updated, and they hired, I think it was 12 new heads of diversity and inclusion, each on 50 grand minimum. I mean, some of these people were up to 100 grand. That's their salary. And it's just such a piss take. And you would think, if you're the health secretary, if you were, if he was a MAGA type Republican, Sajid Javid would have been banging his table, making a huge noise about it, insisting that people be fired, that the service actually, the tax won't go up until that's gone, or whatever. But in the UK, nada, nothing happened. Not even a word.
We've had a so-called Tory party for 12 years. And all this wokery has gone on in the last 12 years, in your face. It's been going on for quite a while, many decades, but it's in your face now, under Tory leadership. And the Tories are almost as bad as Labour. Last couple of years, I think some of them are beginning to wake up. Some of the MPs are waking up now. But it all started with Cameron. Cameron, one who turned up wanting the green agenda, hug a hoodie. He went to the North Pole because it's melting. We had Theresa May in 2012. Dramatically cutting Stop and Search because it was racist, and all these things have happened in and under a Tory government. I just hope things are changing now, and I just hope, but again, I said this when Boris was elected. I remember saying, Boris will be able to do this, he's got an 80-seat majority, and he turned out to be as bad as the others. But I want to give Liz Truss a couple of months, and I just hope she can prove me wrong. I just hope she can be the leader we need her to be.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what I mean by what's our biggest problem in that regard of getting things sorted, is that if you're not a leftist in this country, you're sort of like an abused spouse, where every couple of years there'll be some election or a new leader in which they'll say, trust me, bro, this time, bro, I'll solve everything. I'll stop being a leftist, trust me. And then they get in and they just don't solve the problems. And you're like, I voted for you for exactly this purpose. What the hell are you doing? And it keeps happening. And when this happens on the left, I mean, they have their own ideological problems as well. When they have a leader or stuff that's going on that's not left wing, they are actually very effective at enforcing the ideology for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously, is the whole party just takes it more seriously. Like, they're actually committed to principles and not just winning elections, which, has its downsides because obviously they can't win them. But that's largely because they're commies as well, but whatever. But when it comes to pressure, I mean, like, you have the Lib Dems or the Green Party or whatever else groups within the leftist movements of the UK that are able to effectively pressure the Labour Party into saying, okay, no, we need to go a bit more left to keep the base together. Whereas with the Conservative Party, what competition? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, and you're right. I think their strategy always is, let's be a tiny bit more to the right of Labour.
I mean,
and because Labour have gone so far left, a little bit right of Labour now is probably where we were in the 80s with Labour.
Yeah, like, I'm a social democrat, not a full-blown communist. And it's like, but you're called the Conservative Party, so could you please? But they won't. A lot of them, and this isn't to besmirch anyone who's doing the Lord's work. I mean, campaigning and starting a political party to do this kind of thing is really hard, really expensive. Don't envy anyone who does it. And you got people in all sorts of places like the Reform Party, Reclaim. UKIP's still about doing their thing, but obviously that time seems to have passed, and a few others that are doing their thing. But there just is the reality from stepping back that the reason the Conservatives are unable to do the job, it seems, is that there's no real force to make them do the job. If they don't go to if there was a reason for them to go to the right a little bit to gain a vote share back that they've lost, which they could if a party was taking up that vote share and they needed to get it back off them, but they don't. And you could argue that, I think Matthew Goodwin at the University of Kent has argued very well. If you look at the voters for Boris in 2019, I don't know if you're among them, but I definitely am. That 1/3 of the people who voted for Boris Johnson in 2019 are no longer planning to vote Conservative in any upcoming general election. And the natural consequence is that Conservatives have gone down, Labour's gone up, and everyone thinks, oh, people are just rushing back to Labour. What a bunch of idiots. Politics is pointless. That's not what's happening. I think it's 1 in 10 of people who voted for Boris who now won't have gone back to Labour. 9 in 10 have just given up. They just don't vote for anyone. They're not planning to. And that's a failure of the Conservatives. And if they actually realise that's the reality, maybe that would also be a great argument for why you should stop hiring diversity inclusion managers on 50 grand a piece for the NHS. It's a bare minimum. I mean, I made a thread the other day. You just look on LinkedIn. You will find the names of these people. I can give you like a list of names to fire. It's the easiest job in the world. And yeah, it's not been done. And, here's hoping. That is what I think is the biggest problem. The inability or lack of willingness of the leaders of the right-wing movement in the UK to actually do their goddamn jobs.
Yeah, 2 quick points. My first point is, how am I going to look on LinkedIn? You're rubbing it in now. You're rubbing it in that I've been kicked off LinkedIn. I can see what you're doing here.
You don't have to be signed in.
And my second point is, politicians have come to the conclusion that if you don't vote, you're out of the game. I don't have to worry about you because you're not going to Labour, you're not going to Lib Dems, you're just out of the game. All politicians seem to play to their base. If we could have a political drive, I mean, when I stood for Mayor of Greater Manchester, something like 70% of the people in Greater Manchester didn't even bother to vote. So Andy Burnham got elected on something like 18% of the overall voting public. 18%, 1 in 5. And 2/3 of the people didn't even vote because they felt, what's the point? They're all as bad as each other. They're not going to change anything. They're not going to do anything. If we could get some sort of political movement that aims for those people, a bit like how we got Brexit. If we could aim for those people, there could be a seismic shift there. But how you do that, absolutely no idea. And I'm sure people have tried.
Yeah, well, you say like Brexit, I suppose exactly like Brexit. Because, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the biggest things that made Brexit actually happen was the mobilization of non-voters. It was these people who don't bother voting in general elections because they're all as bad as each other, blah, blah, blah. But when it came to the referendum, decided, nope, I'm voting to leave. And fair word of warning, I voted to remain. I was a student and just was thinking about my prospects. But those people actually came out and are there and are capable of doing it. They're not lazy or anything. They're just sick of politicians. I mean, I'm a bit annoyed because they should have come out and voted for Nick Buckley, of course. But it's it's definitely a tough nut to crack. I suppose if you wanted an actual strategy, you'd probably need to get Nigel Farage, Dominic Cummings, and God knows who else, a few other names, just sit down together and have a pint or two and actually come up with, okay, lads, country's buggered. We're the only ones who can fix it. It's in like the organizational wise. Let's set something up together. No more infighting, no more BS. Just we need to make something that can nip away at the Conservatives' vote share for the rest of time, not just for one election like the Brexit Party did, which did a good job, but that was a one-time thing, or the referendum, which again is a one-time thing. You need something more solid to make sure that our future is not just predicated on a one-time things go right. So,
no, I think maybe the solution, looking at those successes you talked about there, is maybe to have a political party that has one main aim, so people know what they're voting for. Because when you look at the party manifesto, there's dozens and dozens of things in there you don't understand. Most people don't even read it. People who read it don't understand half the things in it. No one believes it can be paid for anyway. But if you had politicians saying, if we get elected, our parties are going to do this thing, just like we had Brexit, we're doing this thing. Hold us to that one thing. Simple message. And if it's popular enough, maybe people will vote. If I stand again, I'll give that a go. That'll be my strategy.
Build a wall. That could be the thing.
yeah. Build a wall.
I mean, I'm half joking because, of course, that was Trump's messaging. But I mean, with the UK, I can't actually think of a better thing. I mean, if these guys were to get together and you needed to mobilize that section of the British right to effectively pressure the Conservatives into doing that job, I mean, immigration probably would be the best one. I mean, especially, I don't know where it is with Manchester. I know you'll work with the homeless and whatnot. And I don't know how much this kills you, but it pisses me off. We have a hotel just right by our office, and there must be 200 guys in there. And I see them every single day, and they get their rooms paid for. None of them are from countries that are at war. They're all just people who took the piss out of our open borders, which again, Conservative failure. And they're in Swindon. They're getting paid money. I see them go out to the park. They just sit there, drink alcohol, which I paid for, and then smash the bottles on the ground to where people walk their dogs. I mean, I can't get over just how upset I am that these people are here. They have no right to be. There's no reason for them to be. When I was in Afghanistan, I actually showed some of the security guards there. They were saying, look, I helped the British Army. Here's my papers. I was like, oh, shit, this is real. I can't get a place. What's going on? And I had to show them the boat people and people in this hotel. You've never seen people more angry at illegal immigrants than these Afghan security guards. They were like, they fled from Pakistan. Are you kidding me? I'm trying to get to Pakistan to be safe with my family. And yeah, we have guys here from Morocco, which is even better than Pakistan. And I don't know if it's the same in Manchester, but you see like, homeless guys, and you take a look. And I noticed here, at least, every single homeless person I see around here, or beggar, I don't know how many are just on drugs, but they're all English. And everyone in the hotel is from a country that's not even at war or famine or anything of the sort. They're just taking the piss. I mean, I do wonder if the solution is to just send them all to Brighton, like Ron DeSantis has done with Martha's Vineyard. But everywhere in the country seems to have some hotel that's fully booked now.
Oh, the hotels are making a fortune. You know, we've just come out of COVID and they're completely fully booked all the time. And they're charging the government extra than what they would normally charge because they're saying, oh, damage to the room, damage to reputation. They're making a fortune at this. Our immigration, our immigration policy at the moment seems to be a TV game show. And what we've said to the world is the prize is living in the UK. We're going to put some barriers up. You've got to get across an ocean. You've got to get across a river. You've got to travel through some countries. You've got to then pay someone to get you across the channel. But if you can manage all that, you win. That's the game. Let's televise it. And it seems to be some sort of TV, escape from the jungle game where you've got to eat kangaroo bollocks every now and again. It's turned into a game show.
Yeah, and the whole thing isn't the easiest to solve if you want to stay within the legal framework we're in. So I've got that sympathy for the government. But if you wanted to campaign and unify a group of people, I mean, if you could get 20 million quid, Aaron Banks money or whatever, Nigel Farage, the big political people to make a coalition, and then strategists like Dominic Cummings, you probably could do something on exactly that basis, is what you're thinking of. Funnily enough, when I was in Afghanistan as well, I did meet a chap there were a few chaps who had served with the British Army and are now doing private security. And one of them was telling his translator about the boat people. The translator wanted to get over to the UK, has all the right to come here, and couldn't. Again, he was more angry than anyone you'd meet here about it. But the guy there, he did make a very good point, which is like, look, you will have this problem forever until you just break the law. And his idea was you get a Sea Lion helicopter. Whenever you get a boat full that arrive at Dover, say, oh, come with us, put them on the Sea Lion. You got your guys with your rifles in there, fly them over, drop them off on a French beach, kick them out, and then fly back. And just do that. You'll break the law, 5 times until the message gets across that this isn't happening anymore. The French will sue. They'll want money. Just pay it. It's cheaper than what we're spending already. And if they tried to stop you, number one, the Germans couldn't stop us. So, it's a big coastline, as Nigel Farage has pointed out. And number two, if you did happen to run across some French policemen who were upset, you're in a Sea Lion with rifles, they're not. So it's getting to that point where I think, military men always do come up with the most to the point solutions. But a solution like that, frankly, is just one that doesn't harm anyone, does the right thing, which is you have no right to be here, go back to France, and would probably be cheaper, even after going through some international court paying the French for violating their airspace.
Yeah, and a lot of these international agreements and laws that we're under, we just need to leave. It's as simple as that. We just need to pull out of the Court of Human Rights. We need to change our legislation here. We need to pull out of the Human Trafficking Act. There's lots of things we can do. We just need someone with a backbone to do it. This is not a difficult problem to solve. Trying to come up with a vaccine for COVID, that was difficult. Trying to solve this problem isn't difficult. It just takes some backbone. That's all it takes. Before you go, you mentioned Afghanistan a couple of times. Could you quickly tell me about your recent trip to Afghanistan and where people can watch it?
Sure. So we're recording this on Thursday, so it'll be out tomorrow, Friday, 23rd, on my channel. Britannica Politica is what you want to look up, or Tourism in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan.
I'll put it all in the description.
No problem. But are you familiar with Lord Miles? So there's this chap called Miles Routledge. He realized that you can just ask your name on your bank card to be changed to Lord, and there's no paperwork, so they just do it. So on his bank cards and everything, he's referred to as Lord Miles. He went to Afghanistan just before the collapse. Everyone was saying the regime will last 2 months, so he was going to go for a week and it would be fine. It didn't. The Taliban took over whilst he was there. And he became an internet personality because he was there during the whole thing, showing everyone what it was like. And since then, he's become an adventure tourist going all over the world. When he came back from Afghanistan, we did an interview together, and he said to me, do you want to go back with me one day? Haha. I said yes. I later realized he was joking quite a lot later because he told me this when we were in Kabul. So, yeah, I went with him. We stayed there for 2.5 weeks, got to see what Taliban-controlled Afghanistan is like, and there's a lot of preconceptions I had that are wrong. It's unironically somewhat safer to walk down the streets there than in some British cities. He says that a lot as a joke, like, oh, glad we're not in Birmingham, haha, which yeah, is a joke until you actually go there and realize it's kind of true.
All those places are safe to walk the streets. You go to, or if you went back in time and walked down the street in Baghdad under Saddam Hussein, perfectly safe. If you'd have done the same in Libya under Colonel Gaddafi, perfectly safe, because the criminals are more scared of the regime, because the regime will end their life. So crime's extremely low in those places. How did the Taliban treat you? I take it you bumped into the Taliban lots of times.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, just to get back to what you were saying before I answer that, is that you're absolutely right. And it's not to say that Afghanistan doesn't have its problems. It definitely does. I'm not advising a visit before someone dies and sues me. But there are Taliban every few hundred meters, and the penalty for thievery is having your hand chopped off. So we would leave our equipment in a car in the middle of the open on a street. Everyone could see what's in there. People around there aren't rich. They could certainly do with whatever's in our car. No one would touch anything. If they did, they'd be dead within a minute. They'd have their hands chopped off. It was just, why would you steal something? You're a moron if you do. And so it is true that, I mean, the most extreme punishments do seem to have an effect. You could argue it's maybe barbaric, but I'm not making that debate. I'm just making the one that does it work, and it does, for sure. When it comes to the Taliban, how they treated us, in the video, I've got 2 interviews with the Taliban. We were out on their Independence Day celebration. So when you're talking to them in that capacity, they're absolutely fine with you, no problems whatsoever. When you're going through checkpoints, they might look at you a bit strange. You're a tourist in Kabul, but no more than anyone else would. The only problems I did have when we ran into people from the south of Afghanistan, there is a joke that when a pigeon flies over Kandahar, it covers its asshole, because everyone down there is a boy lover, as they call it. It's a very old Islamic part of the world. Although even that technically isn't Islamic, but the Northerners do that to girls of that age, but to boys, it gets done in the South. And when we ran into guys like that from that period, so in that place in the world, who were just in Kabul because they rotate soldiers, I found out whenever they were muttering away and we were talking to someone, the translator would take me aside afterwards and say, by the way, they're talking about how beautiful you are. Get in the car, we're getting the fuck out of here. Because, yeah, they're blue eyes, white skin is obviously very rare, and these guys are barbarians. So yeah, that's the only downside.
Finally, your pretty boy looks didn't do you any favors in Kabul, did they?
No, you've got to dirty up and look older, and you'll be fine.
I'd be fine.
Yeah, I think you'd be all right.
No, I'm definitely going to watch that video. It sounds excellent. So that's out next day or 2. This video won't be out for a fortnight, so your video will be out by the time this is out. But have a look in the description, everybody. Click the link, go watch Callum's video on Afghanistan. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. That's it. Thank you very much, Callum, for coming on my show. The next few months I'm going to get your other colleagues on and have a chat with them, and then I'm going to try to get Carl on in 6 months' time, and we can talk about Lotus Eaters and why he set it up and that sort of stuff. It's been lovely talking to you, and I will see you probably in 2 or 3 weeks' time at your office next time I come down.
All right, well, I'll see you then. It's good to talk to you again.
That's great. Cheers, Callum. Bye-bye.